The year 1816 was famously awful. Some of you might remember it, actually. It was known as the year without a summer. And it was the wettest and coldest on record. Crops failed, food was in short supply, there was plague and pestilence, and law and order started to break down. It's a reminder of how kind of fragile the thing that we call civilization actually is. One terrible summer caused by a massive volcanic eruption on the other side of the world in Indonesia, which sent vast clouds of dust into the upper atmosphere and darkened the skies around the world. It's interesting, actually. We believe you can actually see the effects of that eruption in paintings from the time. And some of Turner's paintings, which have these incredibly dark and vivid sunsets, are believed to be caused by exactly that ash cloud. Also, 3 of the greatest writers in the English language were spending the summer in Switzerland, down on the shores of Lake Geneva. And trapped indoors by the terrible weather, they challenged one another to write a horror story to reflect the experience of life that they saw outside. Those 3 writers were Lord Byron, Percy Bysshe Shelley, and his wife, Mary Shelley. And do you know who won the competition? It was Mary Shelley. And what did she write? She wrote Frankenstein. It was a reflection of the kind of darkness of humanity that they experienced. It's a really interesting thing, isn't it? We should never take for granted the goodness and the blessings of creation, of sunshine after the storm, of seasons and harvest. These things are the very grace of God and an expression of his love for the whole of creation. They are precious things. And so this is a story about the grace of God. But it's the grace of God in the face of some of the awfulness of life. Noah's Ark is a Sunday school favorite. It has animals going in 2 by 2. It has boats made out of wood. It has doves and olive branches and rainbows as well. What is not to love? But as you just heard in the reading, it's this mysterious and ancient story is neither simple nor straightforward. It's complicated and difficult in some ways. It also takes up 3 chapters of Genesis, and I'm going to be making reference to all 3 of those chapters in the next few minutes. It raises as many questions as it answers, but it tells us some foundational things about God, about his relationship with creation, and it sets the scene for so much of the Bible story that is to come. So it's very important. Its context, as I'm sure you will remember if you were with us in the last few weeks, is that, last week we looked at Genesis 4 and the tragedy of Cain and Abel. Several generations have passed since then, but things have gone bad to worse. Verse 11, at the start of our reading. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and it was filled with violence. Both the Bible and human history teach us that there is no room for naivety about the human condition. That left to our own devices, mankind all too often spirals into corruption and infighting, like some terrible Lord of the Flies scenario. The 20th century reminds us never to take for granted the rule of law or democracy. These things are fragile and need to be defended. And the consequence of that? Well, verse 6 says, God was grieved by his creation. The Lord was sorry that he'd made humankind on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. Is that the most tragic verse? Isn't it heartbreaking? And in counterpoint to what happened just 5 chapters ago in Genesis, when God looked at the world with human beings in it and said, "It is very good." And now God is grieved. But it's a really important point because, if we ask that question, we say, why would God make a world like this? What Genesis 6 tells us is that this is not the creation as God intended it, and he is grieved by it. When tragedy strikes or when wicked men triumph, God is grieved. And what's his response to that? Well, his immediate response is judgment. The primary response of a holy God to injustice and oppression and exploitation and sin is that he must step in because he is a God of justice. We sit very uncomfortably with that, and perhaps rightly so. But I'm really struck that it's because Jesus has taught us to love our enemies, to turn the other cheek, not to judge. So when we hear about God's judgment, it makes us feel uneasy. But Jesus is able to teach us those things because he believes that judgment belongs only to God. But what's wonderful about this story is that that is not the only thing which belongs to God. Because this story is the beginning of the most wonderful story which tracks through the whole of Scripture. The story of the grace and the mercy of God. Because this is a story of a God for whom judgment is not enough. A God in whom justice and mercy meet. And so, there was a man. His name was Noah. And in a world that had turned his back on God, he sought the Lord, and he found favor with God. And God said to him, verse 14, make yourself an ark of cypress wood, and make rooms in it, and coat it with pitch, inside and out. And then in verse 19, bring into the ark 2 of all living creatures, male and female, to keep them alive with you. God is not satisfied simply with judgment, but this ark is an ark of the grace of God. This is a picture of the salvation of God. But Noah, of course, needs to hear that and believe it and respond to it. He needs to trust and obey God, even when that is kind of completely out of track with the world that he lives in, completely out of step. If people saw what he was doing and questioned him, they would surely have mocked him. And yet he needs to believe God and to act accordingly. He needs to build an ark, which must have been an enormous piece of work. He then needs to go and track down all of these living creatures. And he brings them in, and they wait. And then one day, the rain starts, and the springs of the deep break forth, and the floods come. Now here's a question. What's the significance of the flood? So, do you remember that back in Genesis 1, in the creation story, the first picture we get of the world before creation was that it was formless and chaotic, and waters covered the face of the deep. You remember that? The Spirit of God hovered over the waters. And it's almost as if in the flood, what God does is kind of allows creation to revert back to its primal chaotic state. It's like he withdraws his grace, the grace which brought order to creation, and allows it to revert to the way it was before all of that. It's as if he removes his grace and allows it to return to its primal state. But there is a difference, Because even in the midst of all of that chaos, there is, floating on the waters, an ark where the grace of God still endures. And they would have drifted in the wilderness for what seemed like an eternity. And they must have thought, is God going to remember us? Can life ever begin again? Can there be a better day? And in the dark moments, they had to hold on to that belief that God is good and his faithful promises endure forever. And then finally, the sun emerges. The ark finds a place to rest. The flood starts to recede. The land dries and life begins again. Noah releases the dove. It flies off, eventually returns with an olive branch. They allow the animals to leave the ark, to go forth and multiply, and it is a new day and a new creation. And in that moment, God makes a covenant, a promise to the earth. In chapter 8, verse 21, he says this: "Never again will I curse the ground because of humankind, or will I ever destroy every living creature. As long as the earth endures, and seed time and harvest and cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night, they shall not cease." You see that what God does is he makes a promise, a commitment to creation. He promises that he will bless it and sustain it, irrespective of what human beings do or don't do, and our failure to sort of steward and care for the world that we are part of. God is committed to his creation. And he gives the most beautiful sign of that covenant. This is in chapter 9, verse 12. "I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and this will be the sign of the covenant I am making between every living creature, a covenant for all generations to come." Did you hear that? It's for you. The rainbow, the sign of the covenant, was for Noah, but it was for all generations to come. It is for you. The rainbow is a most wonderful thing. Remember, what it is light, which was the very first step of creation. It was the thing which started to bring order out of chaos, and it sustains light and life itself. A rainbow is that light refracted into its constituent colors, a breathtaking reminder of a God who brings beauty and order out of chaos. So, this is perhaps the first glimpse of the great story of the Bible. A story which exists because, for God, judgment is not enough. Because through a wooden ark, which passes through the waters of death, God rescued the few and brought new life to begin. But through a wooden cross, Christ will rescue the many, passing through death to bring new life to the whole world. In the waters of judgment, creation is destroyed. But in the redemption of humanity through Christ, creation itself is restored. There's a lovely glimpse of that in one of the most famous Bible verses of all, in John 3:16. It says, "For God so loved the world." And the word world is cosmos. It means the whole created order. For God so loved the cosmos that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. So the story of Noah is the story of God's commitment to his creation, a creation which is precious to him and reflects something of him. And that commitment endures right to the end, to the very last chapter of the Bible in Revelation 21, which says, "Behold, I saw a renewed heaven and a renewed earth. And I saw God reconciled to his people, and he will wipe away every tear, and death shall be no more." The story of Noah is the beginning of the story of God's plan to redeem both heaven and earth, to redeem creation and humanity. And so next time you pass through a storm, look for the rainbow, which is a promise of God's commitment to creation and to you. A promise which will not fail. A promise that God has not and will not give up on this world. A promise that he will keep until the end of time. Amen.